The desert heat hit like a physical weight. At 5:30 a.m., Elena Hayes opened her eyes in the cramped trailer that passed for staff housing at Scorpion Ridge Training Facility, Nevada. The air conditioning had died sometime during the night. Again. She didn't move immediately, just stared at the ceiling, letting the familiar ritual begin. On the nightstand beside her pillow sat a device that looked like it belonged in a museum. A PDA ballistic computer, military issue from the late 90s. The screen was cracked in 3 places, spiderwebbing across the display like frozen lightning. But it still worked. It had to work. Elena reached for it with the reverence some people reserved for prayer books. Her thumb traced the scratches on the casing, deep gouges from years of field use. One particular mark ran along the right edge, a scar from when the device had stopped a piece of shrapnel in Kandahar. The shrapnel hadn't been meant for the computer. It had been meant for the man carrying it, Master Sergeant Daniel Hayes, her uncle, her teacher, her ghost. Elena whispered to the empty room, her voice rough from sleep. Day 217, Uncle Daniel, still searching for answers. She powered on the device. The screen flickered, protested, then stabilized. The last calculation still displayed. Range, 2,400 meters. Wind, variable 6 to 8 miles per hour. Temperature, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. The data from her last training session with Daniel, 6 years ago, frozen in digital amber. The memory came without invitation. Arizona, Black Ridge Plateau, February 2019. Rain falling in sheets, turning the red earth to mud. A crowd of maybe 40 people, most of them locals who'd known Daniel as the quiet man who could drop a coyote at distances that seemed impossible. The funeral had been simple. Anything elaborate would have felt wrong. Elena had stood at the graveside, 24 years old, and holding the same cracked PDA, while the minister spoke words that meant nothing. Hunting accident, they'd called it, a tragic mishap. Daniel Hayes, age 60, deceased from a single gunshot wound while tracking elk in the backcountry. But Elena had seen the ballistic reports. She'd studied the angles. She'd done the math. The shot that killed her uncle had come from 2,800 meters away. Minimum. You don't make that shot by accident. You don't make that shot unless you're one of the best snipers alive. And you certainly don't make it while hunting elk. Elena closed her eyes in the trailer, letting the memory fade. 6 years. 6 years of questions with no answers. 6 years of grief so deep it had hollowed her out and rebuilt her into something harder. Something more dangerous. She set the PDA down carefully and rose from the narrow bunk. The trailer was a box, 80 square feet of metal and regret, a hot plate that barely worked, a mini fridge that hummed like it was dying, a closet that couldn't fit a week's worth of clothes. This was what 6 months of wages as a maintenance worker could afford. But Elena wasn't here for comfort. She pulled on her work uniform, faded tan cargo pants, a gray shirt with Scorpion Ridge Facilities stenciled across the back, steel-toed boots that had seen better decades. The outfit made her invisible. Just another support staff member. Just another nobody keeping the base functional while the real soldiers did the real work. Perfect. Elena caught her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. 30 years old, dark blonde hair pulled back tight, gray eyes that people said were intense until she learned to soften them, to look away, to become forgettable. A face that could be pretty if she let it, but pretty drew attention. Pretty asked questions. Invisible was better. She grabbed the PDA, slipped it into her cargo pocket, and stepped out into the Nevada dawn. The walk to the main range took 12 minutes. Elena had timed it on her first day. She'd timed everything, mapped every building, noted every security camera, memorized every face, every name, every rank. Daniel had taught her that a good sniper knows the terrain. A great sniper becomes the terrain. Scorpion Ridge Training Facility sprawled across 40,000 acres of desert. The main sniper range sat on the eastern edge, backed by a series of ridges that created natural backstops for extreme long-range work. The facility was legendary. Every branch of military service sent people here. Marines, Army, Special Forces, even some CIA contractors, though nobody talked about them. Daniel had served here from 1996 to 2004. 8 years. The best years of his military career, he'd told her. The place where he'd gone from good to legendary. Silent Wind, they'd called him, because you never heard the shot coming. Elena reached the range equipment shed at 6:15 a.m. The door was already unlocked. Third shift security made their rounds at 6 o'clock, which meant she had exactly 45 minutes before the day shift supervisor showed up. Inside, the shed smelled like gun oil and desert dust. Racks of cleaning supplies, bins of ear protection, stacks of target frames, and in the back corner, behind a wall of shelving, the brass casing collection area. Spent shell casings. Hundreds of pounds of them. After training sessions, someone had to police the range, pick up every single piece of brass, sort it by caliber, prep it for recycling or reloading. That someone was usually Elena. She grabbed a collection bucket and a pair of work gloves. The gloves had holes in 3 fingers. She'd requested new ones twice. The requests had been ignored. Maintenance workers ranked somewhere below the janitorial staff in the base hierarchy. Also perfect. Elena walked onto Range 7, the primary long-distance course. The morning sun was just starting to paint the ridgelines orange and gold. Beautiful, if you had time for beauty. She didn't. Her eyes went immediately to the firing line. Already set up from yesterday's session. 3 shooting positions, sandbags, rifle rests, and in the center position, secured in a precision mount, a weapon that made Elena's heart skip. A Barrett MRAD, multi-role adaptive design, chambered in Bess 375 Shytech. The rifle was almost 4 feet long and weighed close to 15 pounds empty. Matte black finish, folding stock, suppressor already attached. The kind of weapon that cost more than Elena made in a year. But that wasn't why her hands trembled as she set down the bucket. She'd seen this exact rifle before. Not one like it. This one, specifically. Elena's eyes tracked to the serial number stamped on the receiver. She'd memorized it 6 days ago when she'd first noticed the rifle in the armory during a routine cleaning assignment. MRA-D774-2196. The last 4 digits, 2196. 2196. The year Daniel had started at Scorpion Ridge, 1996. This had been his rifle, his personal weapon during his time here. Elena knew because she'd found references to it in his journals. The 96, he'd called it, his lucky number. But when Daniel had retired in 2004, he was supposed to have turned in all issued equipment. Elena had assumed he'd complied. He'd always followed regulations to the letter. Except, apparently, for this. 2 years ago, after Daniel's death, someone must have found the rifle among his effects, returned it to base inventory. And now here it sat, being used by people who had no idea whose hands had first zeroed that scope. Elena forced herself to look away, to breathe, to remember why she was here. She knelt and began collecting brass casings. The work was mindless, repetitive. Her hands moved on autopilot, dropping spent .308 rounds into the bucket with soft metallic plinks. But her mind was elsewhere. 3 years ago, in 2022, she'd begun her own investigation into Daniel's death. Following leads the police had ignored. The ballistic reports didn't match. The angle was wrong. The distance impossible for a hunting accident. She'd found a name. Victor Kane, former Army sniper, dishonorably discharged. The kind of man who sold his skills to the highest bidder. She'd traced his movements, found he'd been in Arizona the week Daniel died, Found witnesses who'd seen a man matching his description scouting the backcountry, but no proof, no evidence that would hold up in court. So she'd done the only thing she could. She'd come to Scorpion Ridge, where Daniel's rifle was, where the answers might be, where she could establish herself as someone worth protecting when the truth finally came out. 6 months. She'd been at Scorpion Ridge for 6 months, watching, listening, learning the patterns. The sniper training unit ran exercises 4 days a week. Different instructors, different students, but one constant, Staff Sergeant Ryan Blackwood. Elena had studied him the way Daniel had taught her to study wind, patiently, from every angle. Blackwood was 38, career military, 15 years in special operations before rotating to instructor duty. By all accounts, he was exceptional. Consistently accurate out to 1,800 meters, technically proficient, demanding of his students, and arrogant in a way that made Elena's teeth ache. She'd watched him humiliate a private 2 weeks ago for missing a 600-meter shot, watched him mock a corporal's question about wind compensation, watched him strut through the base like he was doing everyone a favor by sharing his presence. The thought made Elena smile despite herself. Behind her, voices approached. She recognized them before she saw the speakers. Blackwood's unit, arriving for the morning session. Elena kept her head down, kept collecting brass, became part of the scenery. "Gentlemen," Blackwood's voice carried across the range like he was projecting to an audience. "Today we're going to discuss something most of you will never actually do in combat, but that separates the competent from the legendary." Footsteps. 5, maybe 6 soldiers. Elena didn't look up. "Extreme long-range precision shooting," Blackwood continued. "We're talking 1,500 meters and beyond. At that distance, you're not just shooting a rifle, you're conducting a symphony of variables. Ballistics, meteorology, physics, even the rotation of the Earth comes into play." Elena's hands paused on a spent casing. She knew this lecture. She'd heard variations of it 3 times in the past month. Blackwood was moving toward the Barrett now. She heard him pick it up, the slight grunt of effort. 15 pounds wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. "This," Blackwood said, and Elena could hear the reverence in his voice, "is a Barrett MRAD, chambered in .375 Shytac. This is not just a rifle. This is a surgical instrument. At 1,500 meters, it doesn't just hit a target, it erases it." One of the students, a young voice, "What's the effective range, Sergeant?" "Depends on your definition of effective," Blackwood replied. "But in the right hands, with the right ammunition, you can expect consistent accuracy out to 2,000 meters. Beyond that, you're dealing with so many variables that even the best shooters in the world are fighting probability." Another voice, older. "What about the record, Sergeant? The longest confirmed kill?" Blackwood's answer was immediate. He'd been waiting for this question. "The current record is 3,540 meters. A British sniper in Afghanistan, 2009. Craig Harrison. 2 consecutive shots, 2 Taliban machine gunners. Distance just over 2 miles. Elena's jaw clenched. She knew the shot, knew the conditions, knew that Harrison had been using an L115A3 rifle in .338 Lapua Magnum, not a Shytac. Knew that the shot had taken 9 seconds of bullet flight time and had been helped by a significant tailwind. She also knew Daniel had made a 3,200-meter shot in 2003 that had never been officially recorded. "The bullet time at that distance," Blackwood continued, "is somewhere between 6 and 7 seconds. Think about that. You squeeze the trigger, and 7 seconds later, the target drops. In those 7 seconds, you have to account for wind speed at multiple altitudes, temperature gradients, humidity, air density, the Coriolis effect." A new voice, skeptical. "Coriolis effect?" "The rotation of the Earth," Blackwood explained, and Elena heard the smile in his voice. He loved this part. "At extreme range, the Earth literally rotates beneath the bullet during flight. You have to compensate for that. We're talking inches of drift, but inches matter when your target is the size of a dinner plate 2 miles away. Silence. The students were impressed. Elena could practically feel their awe radiating across the range. Now, Blackwood said, I know what you're thinking. Can I do that? Can I make a shot like Harrison's? Elena risked a glance up. Blackwood stood at the firing line, Barrett cradled in his arms like a trophy. His students formed a semicircle around him, 6 of them, all male, all staring at him with expressions that mixed respect and envy. The youngest, a private who couldn't be more than 22, spoke up. Have you ever attempted a shot like that, Sergeant? Anything close to the record? Blackwood's smile was visible from 30 feet away. My personal best is 1,800 meters. Clean kill on a simulated target. Beyond 2,000 meters, I've trained for it, studied it. But honestly, beyond that range, you're dealing more with luck than skill. Don't let anyone tell you different. The mathematics become so complex, the variables so numerous, that even with perfect preparation, you're basically praying to the ballistics gods. He set the Barrett back on its mount with exaggerated care. That's what separates a good sniper from a great one, Blackwood concluded. Knowing the limits, respecting the physics, understanding that confidence is good, but overconfidence will get you killed. Or worse, embarrass you in front of your unit. The students chuckled. Comfortable laughter, the kind that comes from being on the inside of the joke. Elena returned to her brass collection. Her bucket was half full. She had maybe another 20 minutes of work here before she could move to the next range. All right, Blackwood said. Let's run some drills. I want each of you at 800 meters. Demonstrate proper wind reading. Mercer, you're first. The unit moved to their positions. Elena continued working. Just another maintenance worker. Just another invisible cog in the machine. But as she picked up a particularly large .50 caliber casing, she caught Blackwood looking at her. Just a glance, quick, dismissive. Then he looked again, longer this time. Elena's pulse quickened. Had she done something? Drawn attention somehow? You there, Blackwood called out. Hayes, isn't it? Elena straightened slowly, bucket in hand. Yes, Sergeant. You're here every morning when we train. It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. Yes, Sergeant. Brass collection is part of my duties. Blackwood walked toward her. His students paused their preparations, sensing a shift in the session's energy. I've noticed you, Blackwood said, stopping about 10 feet away. Noticed you watching, listening. You pay pretty close attention for someone who's just picking up trash. The word trash hung in the air. Intentional. Cutting. Elena kept her expression neutral. I find the training interesting, Sergeant. Interesting, Blackwood repeated, and there was amusement in his voice. Tell me something, Hayes. You ever fire a weapon? Beyond basic training, I mean. If you even had basic training. Behind him, one of the students snickered. A stocky corporal with a Texas drawl, Garrett Briggs, the unit's designated comedian. Another student, older than the rest, shifted uncomfortably. Marcus Stone, corporal, late 20s. Elena had watched him for weeks. He was different from the others. Quieter, more thoughtful. I've done some shooting, Elena replied evenly. The answer seemed to delight Blackwood. Some shooting? Listen to that, boys. She's done some shooting. He turned back to his unit, playing to the audience. Let me guess, Hayes. Couple hours at a civilian range? Maybe you qualified on a 9mm during basic. Popped off a few rounds at paper targets from what, 300 meters? More laughter. Louder this time. Briggs grinned wide. Hell, Sergeant. I bet she couldn't hit a barn door at 500 meters. Elena said nothing, just stood there, bucket in hand, face carefully blank. But inside something was shifting, a calculation forming. The moment she'd been waiting 6 months for was crystallizing around her like ice. Blackwood stepped closer. It's okay, Hayes. No shame in being support staff. Lord knows we need people to keep the ranges clean. But maybe, he gestured at the Barrett, at the complex equipment, at the entire world of precision shooting. Maybe don't try to play in the deep end when you're still learning to swim. Stone spoke up then, his voice quiet but firm. Sergeant, she's just doing her job. Leave her alone. Blackwood shot him a look. Corporal Stone, I'm conducting a teaching moment here. Our civilian staff should understand what real precision shooting entails, what it requires. He turned back to Elena. It requires years of training, natural talent, iron nerves, the ability to make calculations under pressure that would make most people's heads spin. Elena met his eyes, held his gaze. I understand, Sergeant. Do you? Blackwood's smile widened. Tell you what, I'm feeling generous this morning. Educational opportunity. He walked to the Barrett, ran his hand along the stock. I'll set a target at 1,000 meters. Child's play for a trained sniper, but challenging for a civilian. You get one shot with this rifle. Just one. Hit anywhere on the steel plate, and I'll personally put your name forward for sniper school. Hell, I'll even write the recommendation myself. The range went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Blackwood continued. But when you miss, and you will miss, maybe you'll understand the difference between collecting our brass and actually being one of us. Maybe you'll appreciate just how hard what we do really is. Elena could feel every eye on her. The students, Blackwood, even the landscape seemed to be watching. This was it. The opening she'd been engineering for 6 months. The moment when invisible became unavoidable. But she had to play it right. Push back too hard and Blackwood would sense something wrong. Accept too easily and he'd know she'd been waiting for this. I appreciate the offer, Staff Sergeant, Elena said carefully, but I have duties to finish. The brass needs to be sorted by... Don't be shy, Briggs called out. It's just for fun. Fun? Elena repeated softly. Blackwood's expression shifted. Something darker moved behind his eyes. This wasn't about teaching anymore. This was about humiliation, about putting someone in their place, about reminding everyone on this range that there was a hierarchy and people like Elena Hayes existed at the very bottom of it. Actually, Blackwood said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality, let's make this really interesting. He turned away from the 1,000-meter range. His eyes scanned the desert, moving across the familiar territory until they fixed on something in the distance. Forget 1,000 meters, Blackwood announced. That's too easy, not a real test. He walked to the spotting scope already set up on a tripod at the firing line, adjusted the focus, scanned the horizon. There, he said finally. Elena knew where he was looking before he said the name. Devil's Spine Ridge. Elena knew Devil's Spine Ridge. Everyone who worked at Scorpion Ridge knew it. The far edge of the complex, the absolute maximum distance for the range. The ridge where they tested experimental ammunition and where visiting dignitaries came to watch impossible shots attempted by the world's best marksmen. Blackwood laser ranged the target. The device beeped, calculated, displayed. 3,950 meters, he read aloud. Just shy of 4,000. 2.5 miles, give or take. Complete silence. Even Briggs had stopped smiling. Stone stepped forward. Sergeant, that's extreme long-range competition territory. That's not... I know exactly what it is, Corporal. Blackwood cut him off. And I know Miss Hayes here isn't going to get anywhere close. That's the point. He looked at Elena, and his smile was razor-sharp. If you hit that target, that 24-inch orange circle on Devil's Spine Ridge, that's currently 2.5 miles away, I'll eat every word I've ever said about support staff. I'll write you a commendation myself. I'll personally campaign to get you into advanced sniper training. He paused for effect. But you won't hit it. You won't come within 50 meters. And when that happens, maybe you'll finally understand the difference between people who dream about being snipers and people who actually are. Elena's mind was racing. This was better than she'd hoped. 1,000 meters would have been good, impressive even. But 4,000 meters? That was legendary territory. That was the kind of shot that ended careers or launched them. That was the kind of shot Daniel had trained her to make. She set down the bucket of brass casings. The metal clinked against the concrete firing pad, loud in the stillness. "What rifle would I be using?" Elena asked. The question seemed to catch Blackwood off guard. He'd expected refusal, expected her to back down, to make excuses, to scurry away with her tail between her legs. "What?" he said. "The rifle," Elena repeated calmly. "What would I be shooting?" Blackwood recovered quickly. "This Barrett MRAD, the .375 Shytech." He gestured at the weapon on its mount, though I'll tell you right now, even that's underpowered for 4,000 meters. Ideally, you'd want a .50 BMG for that distance. But this is what we've got, and it's more than adequate to prove my point. Elena walked toward the rifle. Not quickly, not eagerly, just steady, measured steps. The students parted to let her through. She stopped in front of the Barrett, Daniel's rifle, the .96. Up close, she could see the wear patterns on the stock, the slight discoloration on the trigger guard where thousands of gloved fingers had gripped it. A tiny scratch near the serial number that looked like it might have been made by a wedding ring dragged across metal. Daniel had worn a wedding ring until Elena's aunt died. 20 years of marriage. He'd kept wearing it for 3 years after, unable to let go. That scratch could have been from his ring. "What's the ballistic coefficient of your ammunition?" Elena asked. The range went dead silent. It was the kind of question no amateur would ask, the kind of detail that separated people who'd shot a rifle from people who understood rifles. Blackwood's expression flickered, just for a second. "The ballistic what?" "The ballistic coefficient," Elena repeated, "of your ammunition. I need to know what I'm working with." Blackwood's jaw tightened. "It's a .670 BC, 300 grain Sierra Match King." "Why?" "And the muzzle velocity?" Now the students were exchanging glances. Briggs's smirk had vanished entirely. "Around 2,700 feet per second, Blackwood said, and Elena could hear the edge in his voice. "Though with this particular barrel, you're probably getting closer to 2,650. "Okay," Elena nodded. "Thank you." She turned away from the rifle, walked to the nearest wind flag, about 100 meters downrange. The fabric hung limp in the early morning air, barely moving. Elena bent down, pressed her finger to her tongue, then held it up, feeling for air movement. It was an old trick, primitive, the kind of thing hunters did. Behind her, Briggs couldn't help himself. "What is this, the Weather Channel? She thinks she's a meteorologist now." Elena ignored him. She was back in Arizona, back on Black Ridge with Daniel, learning to read the desert, learning to feel the invisible currents that would carry a bullet miles from where the barrel pointed. She pulled the PDA from her cargo pocket. The cracked screen flickered to life. Several students leaned forward to see what she was doing. The device looked ancient compared to their modern tablets and ballistic computers. "Where'd you get that relic?" Quinn Mercer asked, not unkindly, just curious. The youngest of the group at 22. "It was my uncle's," Elena said simply. Her fingers moved across the interface. Muscle memory from 1,000 practice sessions. Distance, altitude, temperature, humidity, wind speed, wind direction. The numbers began to populate. The PDA processed, calculated, cross-referenced decades of ballistic data stored in its memory. Blackwood moved closer, watching over her shoulder. "You can't be serious. You're actually going to—" "Just trying to understand the setup," Elena said quietly. Her eyes tracked across the desert, reading it in layers. The wind here at the firing line was calm, maybe 3 miles per hour from the northeast, but that would change. At 1,000 meters, the terrain dipped into a shallow valley where thermals would rise. At 2,000 meters, the range crossed an area of exposed rock that would create turbulence. At 3,000 meters and beyond, the approach to Devil's Spine Ridge funneled wind from the northwest. She heard Daniel's teaching echo in her mind. The desert breathes, Elena, morning and evening. She inhales and exhales. You shoot during the breath, not against it. Distance, 3,950 meters. Bullet flight time, approximately 7.2 seconds. Drop, 48 feet vertical. Wind drift. She ran the calculations 3 times. 9 meters left. Maybe 10 if the crosswind at 2,500 meters was stronger than the flags indicated. Elevation adjustment, 34 MOA, possibly 35 to account for thermal rise as the morning heated up. You actually know how to use that thing, Blackwood said. It wasn't quite a question, more like an accusation. My uncle taught me, Elena replied. She flipped open a small notebook she kept in her other pocket, stained, dog-eared, filled with Daniel's handwriting, ballistic tables, wind formulas, atmospheric corrections. She cross-referenced the PDA's solution against Daniel's notes. They matched within half an MOA. Stone was watching her with an expression that had moved from pity to something else. Respect, maybe, or concern. She's running proper extreme long-range procedures, he muttered to Mercer. Look at her. She's cross-checking everything. Elena approached the Barrett again. This time she moved past it to check the spotting scope. Blackwood had already laser-ranged the target, but she needed to see it for herself. She put her eye to the scope, adjusted the focus. Devil's Spine Ridge leapt into view, the orange circle painted on stone. At this distance, through the heat shimmer that was already building despite the early hour, it looked like a coin dropped on the horizon, tiny, impossibly far, the kind of target that existed more as a concept than a reality. Can you even see it? Briggs asked. There was less mockery in his voice now, more genuine curiosity. Barely, Elena admitted. She stepped back from the spotting scope, moved to the rifle. Daniel's rifle. She had touched this weapon exactly once before, 6 days ago, during a late-night cleaning shift when she'd been alone in the armory. She'd lifted it from its rack, felt the weight, checked the action, verified the serial number, and she'd made a decision. If the universe was going to put Daniel's rifle in her hands, she was going to use it the way he'd taught her. All right, Hayes, Blackwood said. His voice had lost some of its theatrical quality. He was watching her now with something closer to wariness. You've done your homework. You've run your numbers. But running numbers and making the shot are 2 very different things. I understand, Elena said. Do you? Because at 4,000 meters, there's no margin for error. A quarter MOA mistake at the muzzle becomes feet of error at the target. A 1 mile per hour wind call error? That's meters of drift. This isn't like shooting paper targets at a civilian range. This is mathematics. Elena finished for him. It's mathematics, Sergeant. The rifle doesn't care who's holding it. The bullet only listens to numbers. The words came out before she could stop them. Similar to what Daniel used to say, spoken in her voice, but echoing his teaching. Blackwood stared at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since she'd started working at Scorpion Ridge. Who are you? He asked quietly. I'm Elena Hayes, she replied, and I'm ready to take the shot whenever you are. Elena lowered herself behind the Barrett MRAD with movements that felt rehearsed in her bones. The rifle stock settled against her shoulder like an old friend returning. She adjusted the bipod legs, extended the rear monopod, found her natural point of aim. Muscle memory from 18 years of training took over. Her left hand supported the stock. Her right hand wrapped around the pistol grip. Index finger resting along the trigger guard. Not on the trigger. Not yet. That would come later. Much later. Through the scope, the world compressed into a narrow tunnel of magnified desert. The orange target circle on Devil's Spine Ridge shimmered in the heat mirage, dancing like a ghost. At 25 power magnification, it should have looked larger. Instead, it looked impossibly far away. Because it was impossibly far away. Elena's breathing settled into a rhythm. Slow, controlled. The lesson returned to her. Daniel's voice in her mind as clear as if he were standing beside her. At extreme range, half a heartbeat can throw the shot. Your pulse moves the rifle. Your breath moves the rifle. Everything moves the rifle. So you become still, perfectly still. You become part of the desert. Behind her, she heard Blackwood move to the spotting scope, heard the students shuffle into position, heard Briggs mutter something under his breath that might have been a prayer or a curse. But those sounds were already fading. Elena was descending into the zone, that quiet place inside where nothing existed except the rifle, the target, and the invisible mathematics connecting them. She closed her eyes, just for 3 seconds, a mental reset. When she opened them again, the crosshairs settled naturally on the target, not forced, not fighting, just there, hovering over the orange circle that represented either vindication or humiliation. Wind, Elena murmured to herself. She couldn't take her eye from the scope now, but her peripheral vision caught the flags. The one at 500 meters hung limp, no movement. The one at 1,000 meters showed slight flutter, maybe 2 miles per hour from the east. The mirage through the scope told a different story. At 1,500 meters, heat waves boiled upward in thick columns. Thermal rise, the desert heating up as the sun climbed higher. That would push the bullet up slightly. She'd need to compensate. At 2,000 meters, the mirage shifted. Horizontal movement. Crosswind from the right. Not strong. 4 miles per hour, maybe 5, but enough to matter across the next 1,000 meters. Beyond that, she was reading ghosts. The air too turbulent, the distance too great to see individual wind patterns. She'd have to trust her calculations, trust the math, trust Daniel's training. You waiting for something specific? Blackwood's voice cut through her concentration. Not mocking anymore, just curious. Yes, Sergeant, Elena replied without moving. The wind. The wind's calm. Here it's calm. At 2,500 meters, there's a crosswind. I'm waiting for it to settle. Silence behind her. Then Stone's voice, quiet with understanding. She's reading the full wind line, not just the flags we can see. That's, Mercer started, then stopped. That's advanced wind reading. That's competition-level stuff. Elena didn't respond. Couldn't respond. She was counting now, timing the patterns she'd noticed over the past 6 months of watching this range. Every morning, the Nevada desert had a rhythm. Wind would gust for 40 seconds, then calm for 30. Gust, calm, gust, calm, like breathing. She'd timed it with Daniel's old watch, documented it in her notebook, verified it against weather data. The pattern held with remarkable consistency between 6 and 8 in the morning. Gust. The flag at 1,000 meters snapped taut. Elena waited. Calm. The flag drooped. 43 seconds later. Gust. Flag up again. Calm. Flag down. 31 seconds that time. Close enough. Next calm window. That would be her moment. The seconds crawled by. Elena's world had compressed to almost nothing now. Just the reticle, just the breathing, just the waiting. In her mind, a memory surfaced unbidden. Arizona, February 2019, 6 years ago, the night before Daniel died. Elena had been 24, recent college graduate, staying with Daniel for a few months while she figured out her next move. They'd been on the back porch, stars scattered across the desert sky like diamonds on black velvet. Daniel had been quiet all evening, contemplative, that 1,000-yard stare that soldiers sometimes got when they were looking at things no one else could see. Elena, he'd said finally, if something happens to me, Uncle Daniel, don't talk like that. But he'd continued anyway, pulled the PDA from his pocket, the same cracked device she held now, placed it in her hands. Keep this safe. You'll need it someday. Need it for what? Daniel had looked toward the ridge that bordered his property. Elena remembered that look now, the way his eyes had narrowed, the way his body had tensed just slightly. Someone's out there, he'd said quietly. Elena had felt a chill despite the warm night. Should we call the sheriff? No. Daniel's voice had been calm. Too calm. The voice of a man who'd already made his decision. This is my debt to pay. But you stay inside tonight. Stay away from the windows. Promise me. Uncle Daniel, you're scaring me. He'd smiled then, sad and knowing. I'm sorry, kiddo, but sometimes the past catches up. When it does, you can either run or face it standing still. I choose standing. Elena had wanted to argue, to insist they call for help, to do something, but Daniel had squeezed her hand. Promise me you'll stay inside. She'd promised. That was the last conversation they'd had. The next morning, Daniel had left before dawn. Going elk hunting, the note on the kitchen table had said. Back by afternoon. He never came back. The sheriff had arrived at 3 p.m., hat in hand, expression grim. Hunting accident, ma'am. I'm sorry. Your uncle. He was tracking elk in the back country. Someone else must have been hunting nearby. Terrible tragedy. Wrong place, wrong time. But Elena had driven to the scene, studied the terrain, done the math in her head even then, without proper tools. The shot had come from an elevated position, approximately 2,800 meters away, angled downward at 15 degrees. And when she'd found Daniel's body position, reconstructed it from the sheriff's photos and her own investigation, she'd realized something that made her blood run cold. Daniel had been standing still, completely still. No attempt to take cover, no attempt to run. He'd been facing the direction of the shot, standing, waiting, accepting, and his body had been positioned between the shooter's angle and the small cabin where Elena had been sleeping. Daniel hadn't been hunting elk that morning. He'd been hunting the man who'd come to kill him, and he'd sacrificed himself to draw the shot away from Elena. The realization had broken something inside her, rebuilt her, made her harder, made her dangerous. For 3 years, she'd investigated, found Victor Kane's name, found the connection to Daniel's past, found witnesses, found evidence, but not enough, never quite enough. So she'd come here, to Scorpion Ridge, to Daniel's old hunting ground, to establish herself, to become someone who mattered, someone who could testify, someone who could seal a conviction. This shot wasn't just about proving her skill. It was about honoring the sacrifice Daniel had made. It was about making sure his death had meaning. The wind flag at 1,000 meters began to droop. Elena's breathing shallowed. Preparing, the flag went limp. Now, she drew a full breath, filled her lungs completely, oxygenating for the final sequence. Let half out, held at the natural respiratory pause, that perfect moment between breaths where the body settles, where the heartbeat slows, where stillness becomes possible. The crosshairs centered on the orange dot, perfectly stable now, no movement, no shake, just the faint shimmer of heat mirage making the target dance. Elena's finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger itself. First stage of the 2-stage trigger took up slack. No pressure yet, just contact. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. Slow, steady. She waited for the pause between beats. Thump, pause. Thump, pause. On the next pause, she began applying pressure. Smooth, gradual, increasing, not pulling, not jerking, just steady, inevitable pressure. 1 pound, 2 pounds. The world narrowed to the size of a quarter. Everything outside that orange circle ceased to exist. 3 pounds. She heard Daniel's teaching. You don't fire the rifle. You let the rifle fire itself. 3 3/4 pounds. For Daniel, for truth, for justice. The trigger broke. The Barrett roared. Sound and fury erupted around Elena. The concussion slammed into her ears despite the suppressor. Recoil hammered her shoulder with 14,000 pounds of chamber pressure transformed into kinetic energy. The rifle bucked, lifted, settled. Dust exploded from the firing line. A cloud of Nevada desert kicked up by muzzle blast, obscuring everything for half a second. But Elena stayed in the scope, rode the recoil, let the rifle settle back onto target. She watched the bullet trace leave the barrel, a faint silver line in the air, the supersonic projectile creating a visible pressure wave that lasted maybe a tenth of a second before vanishing. Then nothing but waiting. 7.2 seconds of waiting. The 300-grain Sierra Match King left the muzzle at 2,650 feet per second, 1,400 miles per hour. Supersonic by a factor of 2. But physics didn't care about speed. Gravity began pulling the instant the bullet cleared the barrel. 32 feet per second squared. Relentless. Inevitable. The bullet started dropping immediately, carving a parabolic arc through the air. At the same time, air resistance fought back, drag force proportional to velocity squared. The bullet slowed, not much, but enough. 500 meters, still supersonic, still climbing relative to the line of sight. The upward angle Elena had built into her scope adjustment meant the bullet rose above the bore line, peaked, then began its descent. 1,000 meters, starting to drop now, real drop, fighting gravity with every foot of forward travel. 1,500 meters, the thermal column Elena had anticipated. Rising air created lift, microscopic but real. The bullet drifted up a fraction, maybe 6 inches. 2,000 meters, the crosswind section, air moving left to right at 5 miles per hour. The bullet, now traveling at roughly 1,800 feet per second, spent exactly 1.1 seconds crossing this zone. In that time, the air mass pushed it left, 9 inches, maybe 10, 2,500 meters. Halfway through the flight, the bullet had slowed to 1,600 feet per second. Still supersonic, but barely. The transonic region approaching, where things got unpredictable. 3,000 meters. Through the transonic barrier. The bullet dropped below the speed of sound. Shock waves collapsed. Stability decreased. This was where shots fell apart, where precision became probability. But the Sierra Match King was designed for this. Boat-tail design, high ballistic coefficient. It stayed stable, kept flying true. 3,500 meters, final approach. The bullet had slowed to subsonic speeds, maybe 900 feet per second, arcing downward now in a steep descent. Everything depended on the calculations, on the mathematics, on 18 years of training compressed into numbers, punched into a cracked PDA screen. 3,950 meters. Impact. Elena couldn't see it through the scope. The distance was too great. The mirage too thick. But she heard it. A faint crack rolled back across the desert, delayed by distance. The sound of lead hitting stone at 600 feet per second. The sound of physics proving itself. She stayed in the scope, didn't move, waiting for confirmation. Behind her, complete silence. No one breathing, no one speaking. Just the wind and the ringing in everyone's ears from the muzzle blast. Then Blackwood's voice, barely a whisper. "What the?" Elena slowly lifted her head from the scope. Her shoulder ached from the recoil. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained calm, neutral. She stood, stepped back from the rifle, turned to face the unit. Every single person stared at her like she just performed magic. Blackwood had his eye pressed to the spotting scope. His hands gripped the tripod so hard his knuckles had gone white. "No," he muttered. "No way, that's not..." He adjusted the focus, blinked, looked again. Stone moved to the secondary spotting scope, put his eye to it, went completely still. "Holy hell," Stone breathed. Briggs pushed forward. "What? Did she hit it? Did she actually?" "Dead center," Stone said. His voice carried across the range like a pronouncement from above. "She hit dead center." The silence that followed felt like the desert itself had stopped breathing. Blackwood lifted his head from the scope. His face had drained of color. Shock, disbelief. And something else, something that might have been fear. That's, he started, stopped, started again. That's a 3,950-meter shot with a rifle you've never fired before, in shifting wind conditions. That's impossible. Not impossible, Elena said quietly. Just mathematics and patience. She walked to the spotting scope. Blackwood stepped aside automatically, still processing what he'd just witnessed. Elena put her eye to the scope. Devil's Spine Ridge jumped into focus. The orange circle, 24 inches in diameter, painted on sun-bleached stone, and in the exact center, a fresh impact crater. The bullet had struck maybe 2 inches from perfect center, close enough that at this distance, it might as well have been bullseye. Stone chips scattered around the impact point. The lead core had fragmented on contact, leaving a gray smear across the orange paint. A perfect hit. Elena stepped back from the scope, looked at Blackwood. I figured actions would speak louder than words, she said, when the right moment came. Blackwood opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. The sound of a vehicle approaching broke the tableau. Everyone turned. A black Suburban rolled up to the range. Government plates, officer transport. The driver's door opened. A man in his mid-50s stepped out. Silver hair cut military short. Uniform crisp despite the desert heat. Eagles on his collar. Colonel. Elena recognized him from base orientation 6 months ago. Colonel William Cross, installation commander, the man who ran Scorpion Ridge. Colonel on deck, Blackwood snapped to attention. The students scrambled into formation. Parade rest, eyes forward. Cross walked onto the range with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent 40 years in uniform. His eyes swept the scene, the rifle, the spotting scope, the soldiers at attention. Elena standing off to the side in her maintenance uniform. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, Cross said. His voice carried the gravel of a career spent shouting orders. Mind telling me what's happening on my range this morning? Sir, Blackwood struggled for words. We were conducting a demonstration, sir. A demonstration? Cross repeated. His eyes found Elena, studied her for a long moment. And does this demonstration involve my civilian maintenance staff? Yes, sir. Miss Hayes, she made a shot, sir. A shot, Cross said. He walked to the spotting scope, bent to look through it without asking permission. The privilege of rank. He was quiet for maybe 10 seconds. When he straightened, his expression had changed. The casual command presence had been replaced by something sharper, more focused. Someone want to tell me the range to that target? 3,950 meters, sir, Stone answered. Just under 4,000. Cross looked at the Barrett MRAD, then at Elena. And Miss Hayes here made that shot. Yes, sir, Blackwood said. His voice had gone hoarse. Dead center, sir. First round. Cross's eyebrows rose just slightly. First round, at 4,000 meters, with equipment she's unfamiliar with. I wouldn't say completely unfamiliar, sir, Elena said quietly. Every head swiveled toward her. You didn't speak to a colonel without being addressed first. Especially not as a civilian. Especially not as a maintenance worker. But Cross just looked at her. Patient. Waiting. I've worked with similar systems before, Elena continued. I understand the platform. Similar systems, Cross echoed. Where exactly did you gain experience with precision, long-range rifle systems, Miss Hayes? My uncle taught me, sir. Your uncle? Cross's expression shifted, something flickering behind his eyes. Would this uncle have a name? Elena met his gaze, direct, unflinching. Master Sergeant Daniel Hayes, sir. He served at Scorpion Ridge from 1996 to 2004. The reaction was immediate. Cross's entire demeanor changed. His eyes widened. His stance shifted. For just a moment, the colonel's mask slipped, revealing something underneath. Shock, recognition, and something else. Something that looked like he'd been waiting for this. Daniel Hayes, he repeated. His voice had gone quiet. Silent Wind Hayes. Blackwood looked between them. Sir, you knew him? I served with him, Sergeant, Cross said. He was the finest sniper I ever had the privilege of working alongside. He turned back to Elena. Daniel Hayes was your uncle. Yes, sir. He trained me from the time I was 12 until he died 6 years ago. 6 years ago. Cross was processing, computing. And you've been here how long? 6 months, sir. 6 months working maintenance, watching, waiting. It wasn't a question. You came here looking for something. Yes, sir. Looking for what? Elena hesitated. This was the moment, the choice. Keep pretending or tell the truth. She chose truth. Answers, sir, about how my uncle died, and about why this rifle came back to Scorpion Ridge when he was supposed to have turned in all equipment when he retired. Cross walked to the Barrett, ran his hand along the receiver, found the serial number. MRA-D774-2196, he read aloud, then softer. The 96. This was Daniel's personal rifle. I know, sir, Elena said. How long have you known? 6 days, sir. I recognized the serial number during a cleaning rotation. Cross looked at her with an expression that mixed respect and something that might have been sadness, and perhaps relief. And you've been here 6 months, working maintenance, watching, waiting. He paused. Those are fair questions, Miss Hayes. Questions I think we need to discuss. But not here, not now. He turned to Blackwood. Sergeant, I'm going to need you to file a report on what just happened here. Complete documentation, target distance, conditions, results, everything. Yes, sir. And Sergeant, that report goes directly to me. Classified. No one else sees it until I say otherwise. Understood? Understood, sir. Cross looked at Elena again. Miss Hayes, I'd like you to come to my office this afternoon. 1400 hours. We have things to discuss. About Daniel, about that rifle, and about what happens next. Yes, sir. Until then, you're relieved of maintenance duties for the day. Go get some rest. You just made one hell of a shot. You've earned it. He started to walk back to his vehicle, then paused, turned back. One more thing, Miss Hayes. That shot you just made. 3,950 meters, first round, cold bore. That's farther than anything in our official training records. Farther than anything Daniel ever logged. He smiled, just slightly. He'd be proud of you. Then he was gone. The Suburban pulled away, leaving a dust trail across the desert. The range stayed silent for maybe 30 seconds after Cross left. Then Blackwood walked to Elena, slowly, like approaching something dangerous. He stopped 3 feet away, removed his cover, held it at his side. Miss Hayes, he said. His voice had lost most of its edge, but pride still flickered in his eyes. This wasn't easy for him, admitting he'd been wrong, admitting she'd been right. I owe you an apology, several apologies. It's fine, Sergeant, Elena started. No, Blackwood cut her off. It's not fine. We're supposed to be professionals. Professionals recognize talent no matter where it hides, no matter what uniform it wears. He paused. Or doesn't wear. He looked at the rifle, then back at Elena. I've been shooting for 15 years, trained with some of the best in the world, and I've never seen anything like what you just did. That wasn't luck. That wasn't accident. That was... He struggled for the word. That was artistry. Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. Stone stepped forward, extended his hand. Ma'am, I apologize for not speaking up sooner. When Blackwood and Briggs were giving you a hard time, I should have... Elena shook his hand. You were the only one who showed me respect. That matters. Briggs approached last, the swagger completely gone. I'm sorry, ma'am, for what I said about the barn door and everything else. I was out of line. Apology accepted, Elena said simply. Mercer, the youngest private, Looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Finally, he managed, "Can you teach us? Like, actually teach us how to do what you just did?" Elena looked at the young faces staring at her, eager now, respectful, waiting. "I can teach you what my uncle taught me," she said, "but it's not magic. It's not talent. It's mathematics and patience and 18 years of practice. It's respecting the rifle and respecting the craft." "We're willing to learn," Stone said. Blackwood nodded. "Whatever the colonel decides, whatever happens next, I want to formally request that you work with our unit. As an instructor, as whatever you're willing to be, we need what you know." Elena looked at Daniel's rifle, the 96, the weapon that had traveled from her uncle's hands to hers across decades and death. "I'll think about it," she said. But she already knew the answer. She'd come to Scorpion Ridge looking for answers about Daniel's death. She'd found that those answers weren't going to be simple, weren't going to be in a file somewhere. They were going to be in the work, in the teaching, in carrying forward what Daniel had spent his life building. She'd made the impossible shot. Now came the harder part, living up to it. Elena sat in Colonel Cross's outer office at 13:55 hours. The air conditioning hummed. A clock on the wall ticked toward 1400. She'd arrived 10 minutes early. Old habit. Daniel had always said being on time meant being late. The office smelled like coffee and old paper. Filing cabinets lined one wall. Commendation plaques covered another. 40 years of military service condensed into polished brass and framed certificates. The door opened. Cross's aide, a sharp-featured captain named Walsh, gestured her inside. "Miss Hayes, the colonel will see you now." Cross's office was larger than Elena expected. A desk that looked like it had survived multiple wars dominated the center. Behind it, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire training complex. In the distance, Devil's Spine Ridge shimmered in the afternoon heat. Cross stood at those windows, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn when Elena entered. "Close the door, Miss Hayes." She did. The latch clicked with finality. "Sit." Elena took one of the two chairs facing the desk. Cross remained at the window for another 10 seconds. Then he turned. His face looked older than it had this morning. Tired, like he'd been wrestling with something and losing. He moved to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a file folder, thick, worn at the edges. Classified markings stamped across the cover in faded red ink. "Daniel Hayes," Cross said, setting the folder on the desk between them. "Master Sergeant, service record 1976 to 2004, 28 years, 3 combat deployments, 14 commendations, sniper instructor rating, advanced marksmanship specialist." He opened the folder. Pages upon pages of documents, service records, training reports, mission summaries. Official record says he retired in 2004. Honorable discharge, full benefits, went home to Arizona to live out his remaining years in peace. Cross looked up at Elena. "That's the official record. Want to know what really happened?" Elena's throat had gone dry. "Yes, sir." Cross pulled a photograph from the folder, slid it across the desk. The image showed 2 men in desert camouflage, early 2000s, judging by the equipment. One was clearly Daniel, younger but unmistakable. The other was Cross, 30 years and several ranks ago. "Iraq, 2003, Cross said. "Daniel and I were attached to a joint task force, hunter-killer operations against high-value targets. Daniel was the best shot in theater, bar none." He pulled out another document. Mission report, heavily redacted. March 2003, Daniel made a 3,200-meter shot that eliminated a target our entire intelligence apparatus had been hunting for 8 months. Perfect conditions, perfect execution, perfect result. Cross's expression darkened. What wasn't perfect was the aftermath. Turns out the target had family, connected family, people with resources and long memories. He pulled out more documents, photographs, threat assessments. Within a month, Daniel started receiving threats, credible ones, photos of his home in Arizona, details about his daily routine, about you. Elena felt ice spread through her chest. Me? You were 8 years old, living with Daniel after your parents died. The threats made it clear you were a target too. Cross closed the folder. Daniel came to me, said he needed to disappear. Get out before something happened to you. I pulled strings, arranged an early retirement, made sure he left with enough equipment to protect himself, if necessary. The rifle, Elena said quietly. The rifle, Cross confirmed. Off the books, officially turned in, actually in Daniel's hands. He stood, walked back to the windows. For 15 years, I thought it worked. Thought the early retirement had kept him safe. Then 6 years ago, I got a call. Hunting accident in Arizona. Victim, Daniel Hayes. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. It wasn't an accident, she said. I know, Cross replied. I saw the ballistic reports. You don't make a 2,800-meter shot by accident, and you don't make it while hunting elk. He turned to face her. Someone found him, Elena. After 15 years, someone finally found him. And they made sure the shot looked professional enough that anyone with real knowledge would understand. This wasn't random. This was retribution. The words hit Elena like physical blows. Everything she'd suspected, everything she'd feared, confirmed. Do you know who? She asked. I do now, Cross said. He returned to his desk, pulled out another file, different from Daniel's, newer, thicker in some places, redacted heavily in others. His name is Victor Kane, former Army sniper. Served in the same theater as Daniel. Same time period. They knew each other. Elena's breath caught. They knew each other? Not well, but Kane was in the unit that provided overwatch for the mission where Daniel made his 3,200-meter shot, the mission that put a target on Daniel's back. Cross pulled out a photograph, slid it across. Elena forced herself to look. A man in his early 50s, weathered face, cold eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. Kane was dishonorably discharged in 2006, Cross continued. Conduct violations. Specifically, he was caught selling classified information to private contractors. He pulled out another document. After his discharge, Kane went private, mercenary work, protection details, and when the money was right, Cross paused, wet work, assassinations. You have proof? Elena asked. We've been building the case for 6 months. Ever since you arrived here, actually, your presence gave me the leverage I needed to reopen the investigation without raising flags. He slid a ballistic report across the desk. This is from the rifle that killed Daniel. We recovered it 3 months ago during a raid on Kane's storage unit in Nevada. Ballistic match to the bullet that killed your uncle. 99.7% certainty. Elena stared at the report. Numbers, data, proof. Where is he now? Federal custody, arrested late last year. He's currently being held without bail pending trial. Cross leaned back. We have ballistic evidence, testimony from an intermediary who arranged the contract, financial records showing payment from the family of the target Daniel eliminated in Iraq. Everything we need for conviction. He slid one more document across, an arrest photo. Kane in federal custody, looking directly at the camera with dead eyes. He was hired by the family of the target Daniel eliminated. 15-year contract. They paid him to wait, to watch, to find the perfect moment. Elena stared at the photograph. This was the man, the one who'd taken Daniel from her. He'll spend the rest of his life in federal prison, Cross said. No parole, no deals, justice, Elena, real justice. She should have felt satisfaction, relief, closure. Instead, she just felt tired. Thank you, sir, she said quietly. Cross studied her. When the rifle showed up in our inventory 2 years ago, I knew you'd come eventually. Daniel talked about you constantly. His brilliant niece, his protege. I knew you wouldn't let his death go unanswered. He almost smiled. So I've been waiting. For 6 months I've watched you work maintenance, watched you observe the sniper training, watched you study that rifle every chance you got. He paused. I was starting to wonder if you'd ever make your move. Blackwood made it for me, Elena said. Sergeant Blackwood did us both a favor, forced your hand, gave you a reason to demonstrate what Daniel taught you. Cross sat down. That shot you made wasn't just impressive, Elena. It was a statement. It told me you're not here for revenge. You're here for something bigger. Elena chose her words carefully. I want to finish what my uncle started. I want to make sure his legacy means something. Cross pulled out a new folder. This one crisp, recent. I've been authorized to offer you a position. Civilian long-range shooting consultant. You'd work directly with our sniper training program. Help develop new curriculum based on Daniel's methods. Train the next generation. He slid a contract across the desk. The pay is better than maintenance work. You'd have access to all our facilities, all our equipment, and most importantly, you'd have protection. Official protection. Anyone who came after Daniel's family would have to go through the full weight of the United States military to get to you. Elena picked up the contract, scanned the terms. The salary was triple what she made now. The position was permanent, civilian GS-12 equivalent, benefits, security clearance, everything she needed to build something real. There's one condition, Cross said. Elena looked up. You stop investigating Daniel's death. You let it go. Let me handle it through official channels. You focus on the teaching, on the legacy, on making sure what happened to Daniel actually means something beyond revenge. The office went quiet. Outside, Elena could hear the distant crack of rifle fire from the training ranges. If I sign this, Elena said slowly, I'm agreeing to trust you, to believe you'll see this through. I already found him, Cross said. The trial starts in 6 weeks. I want you to testify. Your expertise, your analysis of the ballistics, that's what will seal the conviction. Elena looked at the contract again, at Daniel's file, at the photograph of her uncle and this colonel decades ago, fighting someone else's war. She thought about the last conversation she'd had with Daniel, the night before he died. I'm proud of you, Elena, he'd said. You've become everything I hoped you'd be, better even. I learned from the best, she'd replied. No, you became the best. And now you need to go prove it, not to me, not to anyone else, to yourself. She'd asked him what he meant. He just smiled. You'll know when the moment comes. The moment had come. Elena picked up the pen on Cross's desk. She signed the contract. 6 weeks later, Elena stood in a federal courtroom. March 2025, early spring in Nevada, though you couldn't tell from inside the temperature-controlled building. The courtroom was modern, sterile, wood paneling and fluorescent lights. Nothing like the dramatic venues you saw on television. Elena sat in the witness box, professional attire, navy suit, hair pulled back. The gray eyes that she'd learned to soften for 6 months, now sharp and focused. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s named Sarah Brennan, stood before her. Miss Hayes, can you explain your qualifications for the court? I've been trained in extreme long-range precision shooting for 18 years. My instructor was Master Sergeant Daniel Hayes, my uncle. He served as a sniper instructor at Scorpion Ridge Training Facility from 1996 to 2004. And you've analyzed the ballistic evidence in this case? Yes, ma'am, I have. Brennan displayed a diagram on the courtroom screen. The Arizona backcountry, topographical lines, 2 points marked in red. Can you explain what this diagram shows? This shows the location where my uncle was found and the location where the shot originated. The distance between them is 2,847 meters, approximately 1.77 miles. And in your professional opinion, Could this have been a hunting accident? Elena looked directly at the jury. 12 faces, mostly older. A few veterans, based on their bearing. No, ma'am, this was not an accident. Can you explain why? A shot at 2,847 meters requires extensive calculation. You must account for bullet drop, which at that distance is approximately 42 feet, wind compensation, which in this case required adjusting 8 meters to the left, temperature, humidity, air density, the Coriolis effect, which is the rotation of the Earth beneath the bullet during flight. Elena paused. Let that sink in. This level of precision requires training, preparation, and intent. You don't accidentally make these calculations. You don't accidentally dial in 33 minutes of angle on your scope. You don't accidentally compensate for a 5-mile-per-hour crosswind at 1,500 meters. So this was planned? This was executed by a professional, someone with extensive sniper training, someone who understood long-range ballistics at the highest level. Brennan nodded. Thank you, Miss Hayes. The defense attorney stood, mid-60s, gray suit, the kind of lawyer who'd been doing this long enough to know all the tricks. His name was Robert Caldwell, and he'd been hired by someone with deep pockets. Miss Hayes, Caldwell began, his voice friendly, too friendly. Isn't it true that you have a personal interest in this case? That you're seeking revenge for your uncle's death? I'm seeking truth, counselor. There's a difference. But you loved your uncle. His death affected you deeply, didn't it? Yes. So you're emotionally invested in seeing my client convicted. Elena met his gaze, steady, unflinching. I'm emotionally invested in justice, but the mathematics don't care about my emotions. The ballistics don't care about my feelings. The evidence is objective. Caldwell smiled. But your interpretation of that evidence could be influenced by bias, couldn't it? The bullet that killed my uncle came from 2,847 meters away. That's not interpretation, that's measurement. The trajectory angle was 15 degrees downward. That's not opinion, that's geometry. The wind compensation required 8 meters of left adjustment. That's not bias, that's physics. But you're not an official ballistics expert, are you? You're a civilian contractor who... I made a 3,950-meter shot, first round, cold bore, 6 weeks ago at Scorpion Ridge. That shot is now in the official training records. I've been certified by the Department of Defense as an expert in extreme long-range precision shooting. My testimony is based on 18 years of training and demonstrated expertise. The courtroom went quiet. Caldwell shifted tactics. Miss Hayes, how do you know my client fired the shot that killed your uncle? I don't. That's not my testimony. My testimony is that the shot that killed Master Sergeant Daniel Hayes was fired by a professional sniper from 2,847 meters. The ballistic evidence recovered from your client's storage unit matches the bullet recovered from my uncle's body. The financial records show payment from the family of a high-value target my uncle eliminated in Iraq in 2003. The timeline matches. The skill level matches. The motive matches. Elena leaned forward slightly. Your client made one mistake. He used techniques that are taught in advanced sniper schools. Techniques that my uncle mastered. Techniques that I learned. When I analyzed the shot, I recognized the methodology, the patience, the precision. She paused. He killed my uncle using the same principles my uncle taught me, but he forgot that those same principles would reveal him. Caldwell had no response to that. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy, interstate flight to avoid prosecution. The judge handed down the sentence without hesitation. Life without possibility of parole. Federal supermax prison. Victor Kane would never see daylight again. Elena stood outside the courthouse, early evening, the desert air cooling as the sun set. Cross approached, still in dress uniform. You did well in there, he said. I told the truth, that's all. That's everything. Cross handed her a folder. Your first official assignment. We're launching a new training initiative, multi-service, multi-agency. Department of Defense wants Scorpion Ridge to host it, and they want you to run it. Elena opened the folder, saw the scope of what they were offering. More resources, more students, a real chance to spread what Daniel had taught her across the entire military. What do you think? Cross asked. Elena looked at the proposal, at the opportunity, at the chance to build something that would outlive her. I think my uncle didn't die for revenge, she said. He died because he made a choice to protect someone, to protect me. And the best way I can honor that is by protecting others, by teaching them to be better, to be safer, to come home. She looked at Cross. I'll do it. 3 months later, in June 2025, Scorpion Ridge held its first graduation ceremony for the expanded Hayes Protocol program. 15 students stood at attention in dress uniforms, men and women, Marines, Army, Air Force, even 2 CIA contractors who officially didn't exist. Among them stood Garrett Briggs, now a certified extreme long-range specialist, Quinn Mercer, who'd set a new base record at 2,600 meters, Marcus Stone, who'd been promoted to instructor and now taught alongside Elena. And in the back row, Staff Sergeant Ryan Blackwood, no longer the arrogant showman, now a dedicated instructor who'd relearned everything he thought he knew about precision shooting. Elena stood on the stage. Behind her, a new memorial had been erected, a bronze plaque mounted on desert stone. In memory of Master Sergeant Daniel Hayes, Silent Wind, who believed warriors rise from anywhere and who proved that the greatest weapon is knowledge shared. Colonel Cross approached the podium. These graduates, he announced, represent a new standard in long-range precision. They've completed the most demanding training program in our arsenal. They've learned not just to shoot, but to think, to calculate, to respect the craft. He gestured to Elena. They've learned from someone who learned from the best, and in doing so, they become part of a legacy that will long outlive all of us. After the ceremony, after the handshakes and photographs, Elena drove to Arizona. Black Ridge Plateau looked exactly the same. Red earth, endless sky, the kind of silence that made you understand why Daniel had loved this place. She parked at the small cemetery on the edge of town, walked to Daniel's grave. The headstone was simple. Name, dates, nothing fancy. Elena knelt, placed her consultant badge on the stone, placed a photograph next to it, the graduating class, 15 faces, 15 lives changed. I kept my promise, Uncle Daniel, she said softly. I didn't hide my light. I used it to light others. A breeze picked up, gentle, familiar, the kind Daniel had taught her to read when she was 12 years old. Behind her, footsteps approached. Elena turned. A young girl stood there, maybe 10 years old, bright eyes, confident stance. A man behind her, presumably her father. Are you Elena Hayes? The girl asked. I am. My dad said you're the best sniper in the country. Is that true? Elena smiled. I'm not the best. I'm just someone who was lucky enough to learn from the best. Will you teach me someday? The question hung in the desert air. Elena looked at the girl, saw herself at that age, saw Daniel teaching her to read wind, saw the unbroken line of knowledge passing from one generation to the next. What's your name? Elena asked. Ainsley. Ainsley, Elena stood. How about I teach you right now? First lesson is free. The girl's face lit up. Elena led Ainsley away from the grave, toward the open desert. See those heat waves? Elena pointed at the horizon. That's called mirage. It's caused by air at different temperatures mixing together. If you want to shoot accurately at long range, you need to learn to read it. How? By watching, by being patient, by understanding that the invisible things are often the most important. Ainsley stared at the shimmering air with intense focus. Her father approached Elena. Thank you for this. Thank your daughter, Elena replied. She's the one brave enough to ask. She watched Ainsley study the desert, learning to see what most people missed. Behind them, Daniel's grave stood quiet in the afternoon sun. But his legacy was walking, talking, learning, spreading. Elena had come to Scorpion Ridge looking for answers about her uncle's death. She'd found something better. She'd found his life's work, and she'd made it her own. The bucket of brass casings she'd been collecting that morning, 6 months ago, still sat in the equipment shed, gathering dust, forgotten. But Elena would never forget the moment she set it down, the moment she stopped being invisible, the moment she proved that warriors don't need rank or recognition. They just need the courage to step forward when the moment demands it, and the skill to make the shot count. Wind swept across Black Ridge Plateau, constant, patient, eternal, just like the lessons Daniel had taught, just like the legacy Elena would carry forward. One student at a time, one impossible shot at a time, one hidden warrior revealed at a time. The story wasn't over, it was just beginning.